Hello, this is Dale at Axe Doctor Guitars. We've got a Telecaster here that a customer's brought me to work on. One thing the customer has asked for is another string tree to go here. Some of these guitars, don't know if you can see this or not, but the strings cross the nut at almost a level angle. There's very little angle, so there's very little pressure down on the nut. They can have a tendency to buzz just a bit here if the nut's not cut absolutely perfectly. This nut's a little bit low. It's got some string buzz here, so I'm going to replace this nut with a bone nut. Bone is the best for tone. Another thing he's requested is dressing the fret ends. These are, some of them are sharp, some of them are okay, but I'm going to dress all the fret ends and polish them. Check for any high frets and take care of those. Also, he's asked for compensated saddles. These are the standard 3 brass barrel Telecaster saddles that so many people are in love with. They think they contribute to the Telecaster tone. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't really tell, but if that's what the customer wants, that's what they get. The compensated saddles are filed at an angle, and so you get a better intonation with your individual strings than you do with these. With these, the best you're going to get is an average between E and B, an average between G and D, and an average between A and E. You got to pick a happy medium in there and go with it. So these are pretty much just standard repair or modifications to a guitar. The big challenge on this guitar is this damage on the back. Somebody, prior to this guy buying it, somebody I guess had some belt buckle rash or whatever on here, and they decided to try to fix it themselves. And I don't know if this is coming through or not, but they've taken sandpaper to the back of this thing and just absolutely sanded the snot out of it. A lot of deep scratches here. I'm not sure I can fix this. I want to try. I'll wet sand it and then buff it out, and hopefully the majority of it will come out. Anyway, I'm going to follow step by step with little video clips, and then we'll summarize at the end of it. First thing I got to do is get the strings off of it. I don't normally completely de-string or remove all the strings on a guitar, especially on acoustics. It's just, different people have different opinions. I don't like relieving all that pressure off the neck at one time, because I know from experience that truss rod in the neck is holding some backward pressure on the neck. And when you take all the strings off at one time, it lets that neck flex backwards. And then there's a lot more going on with an acoustic, with the interaction of the neck and the top of the guitar. So unless I'm doing fret work or neck work or working on the bridge, I generally replace one string at a time rather than taking them all off. In this case, I don't really have a choice. I need to take them all off at the same time. Due to the way they've sanded right up next to the neck plate here, there's no way I'm going to be able to buff this out and fix it without taking that neck plate off. So I want to take the neck off this guitar. And I just hope the finish is not stuck to the neck anywhere or something silly like that, and that it doesn't pull out any chunks in the finish and create another job for me. Well, fortunately the neck came off cleanly. Now It's time for wet sanding. Wet sanding is wet, it makes a mess. So now these scratches are pretty coarse and pretty deep. So I'm going to start with 800. 800 may be too fine. I may have to start with something more coarse than that, like 6. I'm going to try 8 though, because the finer I can go, the less work I have to do later. So what I'm doing here is I got a piece of foam. This is actually a exercise mat that I had cut up for another project. Needs to have a little bit of give to it. Without a sanding block, what can happen is your fingers will actually sand grooves in the guitar just from your finger pressure on the sandpaper. This works pretty good though. I've done this a few times. Take some double-sided tape, like carpet tape. Make a sanding block. Trim any edges off. I don't want to come in contact with the guitar. I don't want any sharp corners on it either. Because we definitely don't want to put in more scratches than we're taking out. Alright. Oh man, that is really rough. You can hear it. Right here at the neck pocket where it's smooth. See, you hear hardly nothing. But right here, alright, this is going to take a while, so I'm going to turn the camera off and do some sanding on it for a while, and we'll check back in later. Okay, I think I'm getting about all the deep scratches out that I can. Feels much smoother. Not as much drag on the pad. Not as much noise. I can still see a few scratches, but I'm afraid if I try to get them all out, then I'm going to cut the paint so thin that it's going to look way different on the back of the guitar than it does on the front, because you'll be seeing the wood grain a lot more than you do on the front. For that reason, I've also sanded back into this area back in here just to try to blend it all in together. Because I can tell a little difference in this corner here. The spray's a little heavier than it is in the center of the back, and you don't see the wood grain as much up in there as you do in the back. So I'm going to dry this off, and then I'm going to go over it with 1500 grit. And then after that, I will buff it with buffing compound, coarse, medium, and fine. So I don't know how well this comes through, but as you can tell, there's just a nice even matte all over the back now. I think this will buff out pretty good. There may be, seems like I can see a little bit right in here, a little bit right in here, but for the most part it feels good. I think it's definitely going to look a lot better than it did. So I've made myself a two-sided sanding block. This side's 800 grit, weather dry. This is 1500 weather dry. That may seem like a big jump in grits. I don't think it is. I've gone progressively, 800, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 before, and it's hard to tell the difference to me between 8 and 1,000, or between 1,000 and 1,200. For what I'm doing here, I think the jump from 800 to 1,500 is a good step. Mainly what I'm trying to do with the 1,500 is to get out as many sanding scratches as I can from the 800, and then it makes it easier to buff. I'm buffing this out with coarse buffing compound. I'd like to have one of the fancy pedestal buffers, but I don't. That's something I need to add to my guitar shop at some point in time. But this actually works pretty good. I've used it several times. Well, I think it's going to buff out pretty good, considering what it looked like before. That's much improved. There's still some scratches in it here and here. I'm not sure I can get them all out without taking the paint too thin. I'll try just a little bit more in this area with the 1,500 grit. In this area, and I think the owner will be satisfied with it compared with what it looked like before. Well, I've got everything out that I can. That's as much as I'm brave enough to sand on it for fear of cutting through somewhere. So right now I'm going over it with this 3M hand glaze. Really does a really good job. Gonna buff it out with that, and hopefully the owner will be happy with it. Definitely looks a lot better than it did. So I'm pretty happy with this. I hope the owner will be. It looks way, way, way better than it did before. There are still a few deep scratches in it that you can see, but overall it looks way better than before. So I'm hoping the owner will be happy with that. I'm going to put the neck back on it and start on the rest of his repairs. I'm carefully going around the nut with a razor knife to cut the finish so that it doesn't pull out a chunk of finish when I take the nut out. Also, sometimes the finish is really what's holding the nuts in. It doesn't really take much glue because they got string pressure on them. But I want to go around this all the way. If you can see the yellow here, that's actually finish. So we want to make sure we cut through that finish. So that it doesn't pull out a chunk when we take this nut out of here. Yep, that was it. Alright, plastic nut's gone. Oh, and that one's got a curved bottom. With Fender guitars, There's basically two different styles of nut. Some of them have a curved bottom to match the neck radius. Other ones of them have flat bottoms. I've stuck a piece of this 3M gold 320 grit sandpaper on a fretboard, and I'm using the actual fretboard radius to sand the radius on the back of the nut so that it matches. Okay, sorry you can't see my face, but you probably don't want to see it anyway. You want a good tight fit in here. Don't want any kind of slop. Don't want the glue holding it. What I've done here is taken some of this gold sticky back paper, stuck it down on the flat surface of my workbench. You can just I can sand it a little bit on each side and keep trying it for fit. Oh, that's perfect. Don't need to take any more off that. That's a good snug fit. Slips right in. Changing the saddles is a pretty straightforward job, but I've seen several guitars damaged by people hitting the finish with a screwdriver right here, or letting the fat part of the screwdriver get into the finish. I've got a guitar that somebody traded to me, and it's got 6 dents in it where somebody was adjusting the intonation and didn't watch what they were doing, and they made dents in it, and it's about impossible to fix. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm sticking this tape on my pants to pick up a little lint, make it a little less tacky, because definitely we don't want to have to start patching a finish on this guitar. I've got the saddles installed here, and as I hope you can see in the video, these have these flats filed on them, whereas the stock saddles are just rounded on top, so the string always crosses in the center. Fret dressing and polishing is another time-consuming job. It's really easy to scratch the fingerboard as you're going around the end of the frets with this little fret dressing file, even though it's got a rounded edge on this side and no teeth on that side. It's still fairly easy to make little marks in the fingerboard, so I like to take the fingerboard off, especially this fingerboard. It's finished with lacquer. Also, the whole process of polishing, leveling, it can take quite a bit of time to get it right. So I'll be working on this for a while. I'll do a couple here, and you can see, maybe you can see what I'm doing. The main goal here is to round the ends of these off so that there's no sharp burrs or anything that you feel when you slide your hand up and down the fretboard. Hey, well, to be honest, I got busy working and forgot the camera wasn't running. But since I had the camera on last, I have dressed all the fret ends. Before I untaped the neck, I checked them for level with a fret rocker. Basically, you span 3 frets and it should sit flat. And nice little tool. Got different length sides to make it usable anywhere on the fretboard. This neck checked out really, really good. I didn't find any high frets anywhere. So I went ahead and polished the frets up good, untaped the neck, polished the fretboard just to shine it up a little bit. One of the next jobs I've got to do is to get the nut to the final height for the final string action that I want. But to do that, I need to get the guitar strung up to pitch, so that the neck is sitting where it's going to sit when it's being played. Adjust the truss rod if it needs it. Adjust the saddle height, and then I can get a good measurement on the nut and make sure that it's going to be right when I get done. All this works together. You can't just do one without it affecting the other, so that's really important. But getting very close to being finished here, so I'll keep adding some clips along until we get to the end of this project. What I'm getting ready to do is to slot the nut, get the nut slots to the depth, or near the depth that they need to be. I'll do this using graduated files that are sized to the size string. Here's a 10/1000. Here's a 13. Let's see, what have I got over here? A 12 and a 20, 26 and a 32, 36 and a 42. I've got more around here somewhere. But anyway, you want to get these fret slots as close to the same size as the string as possible. You want a little bit of clearance so that the string doesn't bind and cause tuning issues. But you don't want the slots too sloppy, or then you can get weird harmonic buzzing weird sounds if they're too sloppy. This is a really good tool. It's I think it's called a safe slot, a safe nut. I forget what it's called, but basically you measure your fret height. You stack up feeler gauges till you get them whatever dimension you want to be higher than your fret. To start off with, I've gone with 15 thousandths higher here than my fret height. I'll take this down a little bit more once I get strings on it, once I get the guitar up to pitch. But that's a good starting point. So that's where I'm starting at. And I'll check back in with you later. As I stated earlier, the nut is a critical part of the guitar. As simple as it is, it's critical. And this is a job that I would recommend leaving to a guitar tech or a luthier, somebody who is experienced and knows what they're doing. You may be able to see the way I've got this file running at an angle. This is really important. You want the string to have a ramp going into the nut. And you want the contact point for the nut to be on this leading edge right here, the edge closest to the fret. That is where the scale of the guitar starts. So this is a Fender. Fenders typically have a 25.5 inch scale. So the 25.5 starts from right here. So you don't want the string to be making contact back in here somewhere. That's going to cause all kinds of tonality issues. So anyway, it's really important to get these the right size, get them the right shape. And again, that's why I recommend leaving this up to somebody who knows what they're doing. A common mistake that I see is too much string wrapped around a post. I've seen it just coiled and coiled around there. It's going to cause tuning difficulties because let's say you've got 2 or 3 inches of string wrapped around this post. When you bring that string up to tension, you're not just bringing up this section of string up to tension, also you're bringing that whole coil of excess string up to tension. So for non-locking tuners, no more than 1.5 to 2 turns around the post For locking tuners, honestly, I like to have about a half a turn around the post, because the lock's going to hold it. It's hard to get it right. Sometimes if I see that I've got too much, I'll just loosen it back up and go again. I got that one about right. That's about 2 turns. The treble strings take just a little bit more than the bass strings do, because they're slicker. They don't have the wrap on the outside of them, so sometimes they can try to slip a little bit. Alright, now I got to get the string tree added here, and then I'm ready to start trying to do some tuning and setting up and finish this nut up. I've got the extra string tree installed, and I've got the strings on it, got it up to pitch. The very next thing I want to check is to see what kind of neck relief we have. Necks can't be absolutely perfectly straight. They need just a little bit of relief so that the string has room to clear. As the string vibrates, it almost makes like an orbital pattern. And so if the neck is too straight or even backbowed, then it's going to buzz. So what I'm looking for is to see that I've got a little bit of clearance along the center of the neck here. Okay, that's probably a bit too much. I want to tighten the truss rod just a little bit. It doesn't take much usually. I'm going to go about 1/4 of a turn and stop and check it. See, that's touching now with just 1/4 turn. This is this blade is 9/1000. Still got clearance, but not much. So I'm going to take about half of that back out. That neck actually moved a lot more than I thought it would with that small adjustment. Alright, let's try that. Took about half of what I put in it back out. Alright, I want to stop right there and call that good. Okay, now I can worry about the nut. Well, I'm finished with this guitar now. Got the extra string tree added. Got the new bone nut. Polished the frets up. Dressed all the fret ends. I got them all nice and shiny. Got the new compensated brass saddles on. Got the intonation set. Got the truss rod neck relief set. And did a pretty decent job buffing out the rough sanding job that somebody had done to this. I don't know if you can get a good reflection or not. Yeah, there you go. So I'm hoping the owner will be pretty well. Hoping he'll be pretty satisfied with this. And if you've got a guitar that needs worked on, give me a call or hit me up on Facebook. Until later, this is the Axe Doctor.